For some people, Lane Lambert still has a lot to prove, but Philipp Grubauer doesn't seem like he's one of them.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Thank you to our everydayers, whether you make us your first listen of the day, midday listen, late night listen. We appreciate you. My name is Ayala, your host of Locked On Kraken. Been with you since the very beginning, an accredited media member for my second consecutive Winter Olympics, third consecutive Olympics overall, and I will be covering the guy we're going to hear from in just a little bit. That's Philipp Grubauer. Will be competing for Team Germany, but still on this Seattle Kraken team. And whether it's speaking to Twin Turbo, I got to meet Twin Turbo, have a great conversation with Twin Turbo at KCI, or talking to some other folks in the comments. I know it is split, might be generous, but there are a lot of fans, and yours truly is included in the masses that have questions about Philipp Grubauer. I've told you that I didn't necessarily like how things were handled with Philipp Grubauer last year. But I also felt that the Philipp Grubauer situation probably had something to do with Dan Bylsma's departure. And I think maybe we got some confirmation today. Philipp Grubauer spoke to media, and he had a lot to say. And maybe we're reading between the lines here, but Philipp Grubauer, we've talked about it on the show, not always the most open. He doesn't always go into so much detail, but he definitely did today. And I don't usually play long clips, or I certainly have been encouraged not to as much, but I do think you're going to want to hear what Philipp Grubauer had to say about the goaltending situation, about the situation for the team overall with Lane and his coaching staff comparative to last year. And he was pretty direct. The German gentleman had a lot to say. And so I want you to hear the Philipp Grubauer clip, and then we'll break it down later on the episode. What we're going to do is, talk about what we're actually hearing from Lane, what he's expecting from the team. And we'll also end the show we'll hear from Eberle as well. And then we'll hear from Jason Botterill to give you a sense of what's happening with this Kraken team. Also, I just realized I forgot to update the sidebar. I'll do that on the other side of this Philipp Grubauer video. Let's hear from Grubauer first, and then we'll hear clips throughout the show from some of the other names that I mentioned.
Started with Lane and his coaching staff stepping in. I think you've seen it on day one, or even our first meeting. Way more detailed, way more defensive and system oriented than the last year. So it's been a good start for us. Even day two, it's been incredibly detail focused on the ice. I mean, if you want to play playoff hockey, the game changes a little bit, and those details we were working on early on make a difference in the long run. So I think those are really huge parts, and it's a great start to training camp. Yeah, I mean, awesome. He's a great guy, and I mean, we shared a lot of memories there in Washington, and we talked also about it's been almost 10 years, so time flies also, but it's nice to have him here. He's an incredible person and brings a fresh wind into this organization. Awesome. Surely he's a great guy, super easy to communicate. Love having him on the ice and just talking certain situations over. And he's same as Lane. We're super happy to have him here. We talked. I was here for development camp too, so there was a chance to reconnect and talk. And obviously, then everybody goes back after development camp. So we had a couple phone calls, and super exciting. I mean, like I said, the game changes in the playoffs, right? Those small details in the end make a huge difference, and defense wins championships, and I think that's the same philosophy Lane goes by, and that's how we won in Washington and a couple other teams. Right? You can win a couple games scoring 7-6 goals, but in the end, you need to defend in order to not give up too many. So it's going to help us, hopefully, on the back end there and make things a little bit easier and not giving up too many grade A chances. And from there on, should be good.
But for you
Yeah, I mean, just the daily meetings we have with him on the ice too. It's about the communication and the trust we put into each other. I had the chance to work with him last year in Coachella for 3 or 4 weeks, so that was incredible, and we carried that momentum into here, and it's just super easy to communicate. Yeah, I think a lot of teams are doing it, right? You look at the schedule. There's a couple months where we have, I think January is at 17 games or something. I mean, that's a crazy amount of games, right, in a short period of time with travel. I mean, we have one goal, and the goal is to win a cup here. So whatever it takes, whatever who needs to play and step in net is going to do a great job for us if we carry 4, 3, or 2 goalies, right? So that's something I can't control. Everybody obviously is fighting for a spot and prove them, and anything after training camp is up to the coaches and the management. But we are trying to do our best to help the team win games here in preseason and win games in the regular season. And if we carry 3, we carry 3. I mean, Matt is an awesome guy to have around. He has experience. He's won 2 Stanley Cups. He's been there, right? So it's an important piece to have in the locker room and on the ice as well. Yeah, obviously it's great to hear that he has that belief in me. I think last year was a little tough, not playing too many games. With Lane coming in, there's familiar faces, a fresh wind, new guys, new groups. So I think we're going to play a little bit different than we did last year, which are probably going to benefit a lot of guys in this room. And just going to do my job. And when I get called to play a game, then I'm going to try my best to get the points and win that game for us.
So that was Philipp Grubauer. I think he dropped a lot there, talking about that he feels this is going to be a more defensive-minded team. You know, I'm all about that, and some people have already clocked that with regard to what Matty Beniers has said in the first 2 days, what Lane Lambert has said in the first 2 days. I do think that this team wants to be more defensive. I mean, it's blown my mind what we have justified as good defense as this organization has worked through its 4 seasons, now going on 5. But what Philipp Grubauer, I mentioned Twin Turbo, but something that I was talking about is that Philipp Grubauer hasn't ever really enjoyed good defense in front of him. Things that happened last year cannot all be accredited to defense, and the Seattle Kraken have never truly been, in my estimation, a good and sound defensive team. That's just, and I'm not talking about the defensemen. I say this all the time. It's something that drives me wild, and that's one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on. But Philipp Grubauer seemed to be, in the way that he was very excited about Lane and his staff coming in, but he also dropped things that he felt wasn't working and was very specific to talking about last year. And you could tell he really is wanting to emphasize defense, communication, and he mentioned it again that he wants consistent starts. He said he's all about the third goaltender situation, and coming up later on the show, we'll hear from Jason Botterill about what that situation is with regard to goaltending, and could we see 3 goaltenders? I think the Kraken might need to consider that. But coming up, again, we'll hear from Lane Lambert. We heard what Grubauer had to say about the identity of this team. What is Lane saying, and what is the captain Eberle saying? Eberle also, like Philipp Grubauer, has experienced Lane before. And then we'll hear from Jason Botterill. I'll add some color also with what Matty Beniers and Berkeley Catton have been saying. That's all coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken, once again brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Listen, we know that the hockey season is upon us, and the great thing about FanDuel is that it's a great tool for you as a diehard football I think I just said hockey, but as a hockey fan, but especially as a football fan, if you are diehard, then, we know that FanDuel has some stuff for you. Whether you're thinking about a same game parlay, whether you are looking at a player prop, You can even jump in as live action unfolds, and you can do that in easy ways, quick ways, and the best way to bring a little more energy to your Sunday is definitely to use FanDuel. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting fanduel.com to get started. That's fanduel.com to place your first $5 bet. And yes, they have the hockey there too, but we're more so talking about football right now. Hey, thanks everyone for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Let me know, are you enjoying what Joe has cooked up? We also worked with Tiasha from the Locked On Network. But have you been checking out the social media? Do you like what we're doing with social media? Let us know. We're trying to have more updates here for you. More of the clips that you hear on the show, have those on social media. Of course, that means we want you to subscribe. Subscribe on your favorite audio platform. Leave us a comment, rate, and review. But also subscribe on YouTube. That's going to help us continue to grow the show. I already told you I'll be in Milano Cortina, and any Olympians that happen to have Seattle Kraken affiliation, whether that's past, future, or maybe present, we will be covering them in Milano Cortina. But I want to come back to the clips that we got day one. So Philipp Grubauer spoke today. When I say day one, I'm really talking about that would be day 6 total, but day 1 of full training camp. We heard from Lane Lambert, and I think he had some really great ways of explaining what he's expecting. We heard some of that from Grubauer. Grubauer expects this to be a more defensive team. He expects the team to have better communication. And something that you've probably seen, it was so apparent. I was at that first on ice session. Lane Lambert he will stop practice and break a drill down. What did we see here? What do we need to see here? And, I asked him a little bit about that balance, and he's like, the non-negotiables are 100% coming from him. And then everything else is a balance between him working with his players, his staff to try and figure out, okay, what is the identity of this team? But let's hear a little bit of what Lane had to say. This was after the first full session of training camp, which was on day 6 overall.
Well, we did some system stuff before we got on the ice, but at the end of the day, today was about work and, fighting through whatever kind of adversity you are feeling when you're tired, because you have to do that in games, and I thought they did an amazing job. You're right. It's early. It's day 1. You have a little bit of a sense of what you think you might want to see, but things do change. And so, the evaluation process for me today wasn't necessarily about line combinations and things like that. We did some line rushes today, but there was a certain message behind those line rushes, and we'll get into a little bit more detail on that with the players once we get a little further into camp. But you're always evaluating, but I wouldn't read into any line combinations or any of that today. I think probably the biggest thing is you have to be prepared, okay? And if you're prepared, the players know that. They're professionals, they're smart, and they all want to win, and we're all in this together. So just being prepared. Our team has a mandate we'll be hard to play against, and so in order to do that, you've got to compete. They did a great job of that today, and we have to be detailed. So we'll continue to grow as we go with our systems and things that we want to do. Will it be perfect? Absolutely not. It's hockey. Mistakes are made, and it's just the way it is. But certainly we'll work very, very hard on getting all on the same page here as quickly as we possibly can.
How is that messaging being communicated consistently from the top down?
Oh, I think it's great. I think both of the sort of messages that we had yesterday to open training camp were very consistent. Yeah. No, we're going to be solid. We're going to be solid without the puck. That starts there for me. So we build that identity. We build that into the standard that we set for ourselves. We create a sort of a DNA type situation. And then from there, it grows, and we want to be fast, we want to be aggressive, we want to pressure. All of those things are things we've talked about. All of those things are things we'll work on as we go forward in practice. No, not necessarily. We have a lot of confidence, and we have a lot of belief in our younger players as well. So it'll be a good mix. We have to get our team ready to play, but with the understanding that, we have some players that need to get opportunities as well.
I'm going to leave it there. I mean, Lane had a lot of really interesting things to say, including that he made it clear this is going to be a team where the discipline is expected and is the mandate. The communication, he said, the messages are going to be the same. And it just sounds to me like we're starting in the first 2 days of full camp to get a read on why Dan Bilesma might not be around anymore. Whoops. So another thing another thing that we heard from Lane Lambert is that Jessica Campbell, the only carryover, of course, from the Bilesma era, will be working on player development, which we knew was going to be the case. Which includes, of course, the prospects, but also more veteran NHLers. And she will also be leading faceoffs. So that will be something that we'll keep a keen eye on. But, we'll talk a little bit more in episodes to come about the breakdown of the coaching staff, what that's looked like at training camp, etc. Coming up next, we will hear from Jason Botterill and a little bit from Eberle. You heard from Lane Lambert what his philosophy is. What does Ebbs have to say about how that's going to play out, knowing that he's had experience with Lane Lambert? We'll talk about that as we close out today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Seattle hockey fans, welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken. And I just played you some clips from Lane Lambert. He wants communication to be sound, to be tight. He has expectations that he is going to uphold. And, including that, I said it to, again, Twin Turbo and I were talking, but I felt that this is the most fit we've seen the team. And I thought that last year, Dan Bilesma did a really great job of opening up the lungs on day one. And it was even better under Lane Lambert, which I'm super excited about. I felt like some things went down that were a little dirty, maybe towards Dan Bilesma, but hearing Philipp Grubauer was extremely illuminating for me, at least. I feel like the German gentleman was throwing shade without throwing shade. He was answering the questions he was asked, but he made sure, in my opinion, to answer them in a very specific way, which was a comparison. Now, of course, that's what all of us want, right? When we're in the media scrums and you get answers like that, that's the best, because that's really what you're asking. You just sometimes get used to having to ask in a particular way because players, are media trained and might try to take the question the other way. That's why I thought it was so illuminating, because I do think that Philipp Grubauer is very well trained to speak to media. He does not say much that he doesn't want to say. He will always drop the line, and we heard it from Lane Lambert, those conversations are private, so we're going to leave it that way. He's not going to tell you what he talked about with someone else, but he will find a way to tell you how he feels about things. So I thought that was very illuminating. Let's hear, though, from Jordan Eberle, who's worked with Lane Lambert before. We'll close out hearing from Jason Botterill, but specifically about the goaltending pipeline.
That was a great first day. I thought guys were competing hard. I thought, details were good. The execution was good. And more than that, but just competing and, making plays under pressure. That's the biggest thing. So, the fundamentals of our team is just, we want to get some work ethic. We want teams to come in and, say that team works hard. They're structured. They defend well. Their details are excellent. And, they had some skill on top of that. So, today was just about getting some compete back and some battle level in and, obviously working.
So that was Jordan Eberle. And something that he said that I found really interesting was, he said that was a great first day. He said it was a great first day, and I loved hearing it because I thought so too. I thought that the first full session was very successful in that respect. He also talked about how he wants that team, the drive the task is to be a hard team to play against. We heard Lane say that as well. But the way Eberle said it, it was almost like, be hardworking and then, we try to add the skill on later. Where I think from what I heard from Jason Botterill, it goes back to, is this a team competing for a playoff spot in earnest this year? Or is it a team that's competing to see when they can be a perennial playoff team? I think those are two different questions, and the answers likely, would vary, or the starting point varies depending on where you think this team is. But let's hear what Jason Botterill had to say specifically about goaltending, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what he said about, effectively being a perennial playoff team.
I think within our own locker room right now, I think we have a coach that's won a Stanley Cup. We have 6 players that won a Stanley Cup. They're all obviously always driven. I think we look at our roster, competing for a playoff spot is something that certainly is our expectations. It's a very difficult league. I think a big messaging that we're going to have to continue to focus in on is player development. And when we talk about player development, people think it's just the young players. Yes, we're going to work very closely with a Catton, a Newman, a Shane Wright to take the next step. But we're also going to be working a lot from player development standpoint to get out of our own players, our veteran players. But we like our mix here right now of veteran players and younger players. I think it's going to be a continued evolution on making sure our younger players are coming to the system. A big one that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of weeks is just where Catton's fits in from that mix. But we're excited about the veteran players that are coming to Seattle, being a part of a group here, and the younger players developing to eventually get in the playoffs and then make the step, whether to see when we're going to make that next step after getting in the playoffs. I think it depends on how we do in the playoffs and our success there. Yeah, they're certainly going to be competing. We're ecstatic that Joey got the opportunity to be at the USA orientation camp. He certainly deserved that opportunity. Joey's done a great job of, I think, the last couple of years developing into a really number one goalie in the National Hockey League, and it's great to see. It's just great to see a goalie that was playing games for us in the Calder Cup Finals to now being in the mix to possibly make a U.S. Olympic team. So ecstatic from that standpoint. We've talked about it earlier in different positions, forward, D-men, adding sort of depth in those roles, competition in those roles, and we've certainly done that with the goaltending position too. We're going to need the 3 of them throughout the year. As I talked to you before, we're ecstatic about Coco and Osman as young goalies developing our system, but you don't want to throw them in NHL games until they're ready. They need to play at the American Hockey League, go from there. We'll continue to evaluate the situation. We have ideas on carrying 3 goalies. We also have ideas if there's injuries that we have to make an adjustment from that standpoint, but we're ready for it, whatever materializes over the next couple of weeks. Yeah, I think the opportunity, there's a competition there for sure. I think there's different scenarios where we've looked at being able to carry 3 goalies. And you just, like we talked about before, how condensed some of the games are, I think you're going to need 3 goalies throughout the season.
So again, that was, Jason Botterill. I actually did keep the clip. I couldn't remember if I couldn't remember if I had cut the clip or if I left it in the edit. Edited it. That sounds so weird. Anyway, I'm leaving that in. I was I'll edit it, but no, I'm gonna leave it there. Anyway. Ooh, English, what a weird language. Anyway, I edited it. Okay. Anyway, what was I going to say? Okay. Jason Botterill talked about what it's going to take to be a playoff team. And, I think that there is some expectation that that's the baseline, right, for this season. That's where I'm just not sure. I like what I'm hearing from Lane Lambert. I like what veterans are saying about Lane Lambert. And it seems like discipline, structure, communication were the big things that this organization felt it needed. And you can only assume felt that they didn't get from Dan Bylsma in the way that they needed it. And that's why he's no longer with the organization. I thought Philipp Grubauer, what he said was very telling. I think Eberle, is also showing a lot of, he's showing a lot of excitement about what a coach like Lane Lambert can do. But this is just training camp. And yes, we have some preseason games coming up, but it gets down to how this team is going to perform on the ice. And we've seen them struggle throughout the 4 seasons, now going on to season 5, to do just that. So this is not a walk in the park. It's not a guarantee of anything. I said I liked some things that I was hearing from Dan Bilesma, and we see that didn't work out. There are personalities that come into play. I just watched the New York Liberty lose to Phoenix earlier in the opening round, and one thing that Satu Sabali for the Phoenix Mercury said is that we had to learn quickly that when there is conflict, how are we going to handle it? How do we get over it? And you have to learn how to do that. It's not waiting for it to happen. It's not hoping that it doesn't happen. It's preparing for when it does, because it's inevitable. And I get the sense that how Lane Lambert is doing things is that he wants to establish that now. You have to be in a particular kind of balance with setting the tone, being the authoritative figure, but also having open and honest communication. And there is a balance to be struck. That balance is not only different year to year because of the team and how it's built, but it also is a balance that is individualized. And what you say to the group and how you say it to the group maybe has to be different when you go from one player to another. I think Lane has the experience to know that, and it seems like he has the staff as well that can be supportive of that. So how does it all fare? Well, we'll talk about our predictions and where we think the team is going to end up, and of course, we'll continue to talk about training camp, but we'll save that for another day. A reminder to be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, and hopefully you won't drag me too much for not knowing how to say the phrase edited it. That's difficult for my accent, people, all right? Anyway, thanks again for tuning in. I will catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.